So what kind of music were you playing when you first started on guitar?
I would say mostly rock music, rock and roll. Grew up around. My parents were very into the likes of like Led Zeppelin, Jimi Hendrix, Santana, Thin Lizzy, and so I started there playing blues rock, that kind of thing. Migrated then to heavier stuff, metal mostly, metal drone, and I guess with that kind of music came kind of an obsession with technique.
Right.
Started getting into prog rock then, and King Crimson. Unhealthy obsessions with bands like Dream Theater and all that kind of stuff. So I was a real shreds guitar head for a long time, and then I think King Crimson stuff really lent itself pretty well to experimental music.
That was going to be my next question: is what got you into more experimental music?
I think guitar players like Robert Fripp for sure. I love the idea of what age was I? I was probably around 17 years old, 16, 17 when I started listening to that music. Around the same time I started recording my own music. So I guess, I love the idea of applying music production techniques in a live performance scenario. So, you see somebody like Fripp working with Frippertronics and things like that. That's an immediate gateway into, how does he do that? And, that was the beginning of the end, really.
Or the beginning of the beginning. Were you into extra strings on your guitar before you started getting into experimental stuff, or was that a...
Yeah, I think that was really a product of my love for heavier music. I loved, I grew up on thrash and British new wave, heavy metal, everything from Iron Maiden right through to, and then I love the American stuff too, like, Metallica and then, heavier, the prog stuff, a lot of 7-string guitar players in that realm, but then, you had the likes of Meshuggah really pushing the boundaries with lower registered instruments. And that, I just, it's a sound I just couldn't quite put my finger on why, but it really moved me, and the idea of extended register instruments was super interesting always. So, having extra bass handy was always a desirable feature, I guess.
Sure. So when did you? So you were starting to describe getting into more experimental music, and did that coincide with getting into modular synths and Ableton and Max, or?
But yeah, mostly in software. I was playing in rock bands pretty much right through the age of 22, like touring rock bands and things like that. I had a friend that came to one of my shows, and he came, after the show, we were sitting down having a beer or something, and he was like, and he knew I was interested in experimental music, because I'd always played around with like ambient kind of guitar sounds, and I was into Fripp and, Blue, and even more experimental guitar players. David Torn comes to mind. I was very familiar with David's work, and Andre LaFosse, and who I fortunately can call a good friend, at this point, and very interested in people that use technology in a performance setting. And so, like, he invited me to an orientation at Stein in Amsterdam.
Right.
At the age of like 20, I think it was 21 at the time. And I had no interest in programming. I had only interest in playing guitar. Like, I just finished a round of lessons with the jazz guitarist Mark McKnight in the United Kingdom. So at that point, I was really focused on developing my theory, and playing less modally and more kind of jazz-oriented material. But then I went to Stein, and they were like, "Well, do you program?" And I was like, "No, I have no interest." And I was using Ableton Live at that point. I was really a big live user at that point. I used it for my recordings. They said, well, if you want to build the systems that you want to use to make your performance dream a reality, you need to have some kind of skill set to allow you to do that, to permit you to build things that you want. And so they showed me their software. They showed me Lisa and everything else that Stein provides. And then PD seemed like an easy option because it was free.
Well, let's get back to let's get some terms like Steim is STEIM and
Steim is STEIM. Yeah, it's the Studio for Electro Instrumental Music. It's one of the oldest electronic music studios in Europe. It's still there. Still collaborates a lot with. There's a Sonic Arts kind of study or program at The Hague, and then I know that there's kind of like cross pollination between Steim and The Hague. And also, like, there was a guitar player there at the time at Steim called Joel Ryan, and he had played around with, pitch tracking in real time for electric guitar, which I thought was fascinating. And I was like, well, how do you do this stuff? I mean, at that time, you had like the AX50 by Axon, that Axon AX50 unit, for MIDI, guitar to MIDI stuff. And nothing quite cut the mustard, so the saying goes, right? I mean, it didn't really, there was latency, and then, and I wasn't really satisfied with the tools that were there. So I wanted to try and, first of all, build something that was more reliable in terms of like a tracking system for my guitar, something that was intelligent enough to listen to me as a performer, and then take that data and use it in real time. That was the first part. And then the second component was, I wasn't really interested in MIDI protocol at all. I thought MIDI kind of sucked. It was kind of clunky, and you were limited to the idea of dividing a musical note into note on and note off stages into discrete form seemed stupid. It makes sense to some degree, but to me, I thought, I like the continuous component of it, so I wasn't really interested in that. So I wanted to maintain this kind of idea of like it's a divided pickup. I want to be able to manipulate the audio for each register and that kind of thing, and that kind of then led into me going back to graduate school and doing a doctorate in music, where the focus was like performance systems design. So,
and that's just a few terms that you mentioned. Lisa, that's the programming language that Steim came up with, I believe. Is that
it is. It's I would describe it more as a tool, I suppose. But yeah, LISA, a couple S, right, I believe, in there. I'm not entirely sure if that's right. It's been a long time, but Lisa was kind of their bread and butter kind of software that they presented to artists, and a lot of artists that went through Stein would use it pretty frequently in performances.
But you got into PD, which is pure data, which is a different.
Yeah, and that was really a blessing in disguise, because it became my main teaching tool when I was a professor at Stevens. I've since developed, a real wealth of really good relationships and friendships with people in the PD community, including Miller Puckett, who invented it. And Miller's an avid guitar player as well, and very interested in the idea of multi-channel guitar. He designed a system for a divided pickup called SMECK, SMECK, and it is widely available. It's on his website, and he still plays a lot. I got into PD. And primarily because I was familiar with Macs at the time. Everybody used Macs. I was exposed to it at university, and I had no interest in it at that time, but then I thought, well, I'm familiar with the idea of like visual programming languages. And the funny thing is, like, I hadn't quite pieced together that it was a virtual representation of, I'm kind of pointing in front of me here, at the, of a, physical hardware synth. It's kind of funny how things unfold, but PD was super helpful. I ended up running the PD convention, the international, like they run an international convention every 5 years at this point. In 2011, at the University of Bauhaus University, that was kind of headed up by Max Neupert. And that was great. And that was a real eye-opener to like the idea of like programming your environment for music performance. I performed there with guitar, a piece for 8 loudspeakers, and it was really nice.
Where was this again?
It was in Weimar. So Bauhaus, okay. It was the Bauhaus University in Weimar.
Is that Bauhaus like the original Bauhaus?
I'm not entirely sure if it's tied to the original Bauhaus. I believe it's. I believe so. Yeah.
It's spelled the same way.
I was built the same way, yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean that happened in 2011. Fast forward 5 years, I was the co-conference chair for the next one, so in New York. So that was between NYU and Stevens in 2016.
And how did you get to the States?
My wife, she's American. She's from Memphis, Tennessee. She is not Southern in the slightest. She is kind of, we joked that she was a New Yorker born in the South. I mean, she's very much Northeastern attitude and kind of, approach to life, strong work ethic, very direct and, just on fire all the time, pretty much. She came to study in Ireland. We met there. We lived there for 5 years, and then I was offered the job at Stevens in Hoboken, New Jersey, and we went back to the States. And she taught at Tufts in Boston, and we've just been moving around a bit. But we both quit academia. We got fed up with it. We got fed up with all the traveling and being separated, because of not being able to find jobs in the same city, that kind of thing. And then we neither of us were close to family either. So it was just like, this is ridiculous. So we pulled the plug on that, and we're resetting. I started this company, Delta Sound Labs, which has been a lot of fun because I've been able to effectively build the things I've wanted to build for so long with the people that I really love building things with. And Laura's going back to law school, so that's why we're in Ohio at the minute. She's going Case Western to study international law, to be an international prosecutor.
And why are you? What do you guys exactly do at Delta Labs? How did that come to be? And what because I'm looking at the website, it seems like there's a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah, I mean Delta Sound Labs started. This time last year. We've only been going for a year, and basically the co-CTO Edwin Park and I lived in the same building in Hoboken, and we knew each other pretty well, and we used to hang out. And he's a first and foremost a developer. He went to Cornell. Can speak fluently in every single computational language under the sun. I was like, well, hey, I've always wanted to start a music tech company. You want to get in on that? And he was like, yeah, sure. He loved it. I mean, he's a very creative person, and he was very excited to start something with me. So, I mean, we started developing software. I had all these, like I showed you in Nashville, I had all these PD patches, and I was like, well, I really would love this to be in VST form. So he and I sat down together, researched, VST development together, and put together Stream, our first kind of like open beta, which is a free plugin, a granular sampler. And that's just one angle that we're teasing out at the minute. The other angle then is a long-term collaboration that I've had with another guy called John Harding. He's based in Ireland, and he's a very talented hardware designer. And he designs wonderful, modular synthesizers that, whether they're wavefolders or, I showed this control units at the Nashville meetup. So John's on the hardware side, and Ed's on the software side, and I just brought these two guys together who had never met, and I was like, I've been working with both of you for a while now on these projects. I want us to come together as three people and really make a go of it, and really like form a company, and let's make cool tools for people to use. And it's been a really, really good year where we've built some really neat stuff. We've been involved in really cool festivals like Mugfest. We had a residency at Technicolor in Culver City in LA. We're going to Loop in November. So it's been really cool, and it's been tough at the same time. It's been a big steep learning curve for me to run a company. I've never run one before, so I mean it's been pretty.
And you're finding you can do this with the three of you in different places in the world at this point?
Absolutely. I mean, Ed's in LA and John's in Ireland, and thank God for technology. I guess like we keep track on online pretty much. We meet when we have to. We talk pretty much every day on our little chat platform that we use. River is the chat platform that we use. And I mean, it's fine. John has his to-do list. I have my to-do lists. Ed has his, and we just keep on keeping on. They know when the main events are that are coming up. You know, we stay focused. So I think this 2018, the latter part of 2018 is going to be a good year, or a good part of the year for us, I think.
So, so all along you've been performing with this software that you developed, the PD software you've developed, and and I want to lead up to that performance stuff. But you have you're involved with a couple of records that I wanted to ask you about, like the Aiden Baker record, Origins and Evolutions.
Yeah.
How did that come about, and how was that put together? There's 12 guitar players on there or something?
Yeah. So Helmut Neidhart, N, is a good friend of mine. We've done a couple of gigs together. We played first together at Ambient Antwerp in, I think that was 2011. It was actually while I was at Stein. I took the train up to Antwerp and played a show with him. And then we ended up doing a full-scale tour of Belgium and Germany the following year. So he's always been a great friend, and we just finished this new record together, Disrupt Construct. And he actually put me in touch with Aiden, and Aiden was like, I'm looking for experimental guitar players to basically form a score, record it, and then I'm going to put together this very experimental record. So I mean, effectively, it was like prepared guitar, steel rods on the strings, you know, blue tack dampening frets at, you know, various points on the fretboard, and it was pretty wild result. And
Was everybody in the studio together, or was this all?
No, completely remote. It was kind of like, do your thing at home, send it to me, I'll make a record out of it.
So was there a score or direction, or?
Yeah.
So, and were you listening to any of the other guitar players' tracks while you're doing it, or everybody just did their own track and you put them together?
I think, if memory serves me right, there was a reference track that Aiden provided along with a score, and that was it. So we didn't hear what the other guitar players had produced. It was, you know, here's a benchmark, here's a score, do your worst, send it up. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. When I listened to some of it, and especially like the opening track, it's hard to believe it doesn't sound like that many guitars on it. It sounds like a drone, you know. I mean, were people duplicating the drones, or why?
Yeah, I mean, I think he wanted as much source material as possible for that record, and then, you know, in terms of like how he arranged it, was entirely up to him. As far as I know, I think we all had the same score, so what you're hearing is a lot of doubling up and a lot of fusion of effectively the same part being played by multiple guitars, which is really nice, because you get that really nice detune drone effect, which I've grown really, really fond of, actually. So yeah, it was a nice project to be involved in.
Right. So what is your system for multi-channel guitar?
That's a good question. So it's well.
In terms that maybe somebody who doesn't program can understand.
See, it's a dangerous question, because I kind of like feel obligated to give you the history of like multi-channel guitar, you know, since the beginning of time, as far as I understand it, which could be a longer conversation. Is that something you want?
If you could condense it a little bit. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's an old idea, right? It's not people still think it's super cool and new. It's not. It's really old. People were messing around with divided pickups since the time of John Martin. You know, John Martin was renowned. I had a great conversation with Adrian Freed. He was he's big Max guy. He was at SynMat at University of California, Berkeley for a long time, and with David Wessel. And he's a big guitar head. And I talked to him about this, and it was like, you know, it's an old technology. John Martin was breaking up, you know, old Fishman pickups and putting them through, you know, 3 strings through delay pedals and stuff. So in principle, it's been done. I mean, the idea of like processing registers differently for timbral, for timbre's sake. So you know, from that, and then you had Jimi Hendrix. So you had all these guitar players, you know, in the '60s that were focusing on timbre a lot through effects processing. I mean, if you when you say wah, you think Jimi Hendrix, right? I mean, there's that component, or maybe you don't. I don't know. I do anyway. But the multi-channel thing's been around for a while, and then it's an adaptation of MIDI guitar technology, really. So that technology basically allows you to parse out, pitch and envelope data per string, and then that gives you MIDI data, right? So it gives you MIDI note data per register, and generally the tracking's okay. Generally it's fine. But I think it kind of missed the point of or rather, it didn't capitalize on a really cool invention, because the invention gave you much more than just MIDI events. It gave you, oh, now I can access audio for each register. That's wild. And I'll never forget when Gibson tried to make it a thing, with the HD or HDX, the 6-string that they released, the robot guitars, all that kind of stuff, and the early 2000s. I mean, they kind of joked. They said, you could plug each string into a Marshall stack. And at the time, I thought, that's ridiculous. Why would you do that? That's stupid. That's intelligent use of it. But you know what? You could actually do some cool stuff in retrospect.
Well, the original use of the hex pickup was to convert each string to MIDI, and then you could do different sounds with the different. You could either control a synth type sound, or you could play bass notes on your low strings, and you could theoretically divide up those strings any way you like, or play 6 different synthesizers with it if you wanted for 6 strings. How does that differ from what you're talking about? You've eliminated MIDI. Is that the thing?
Well, it's eliminated synthesis, and not necessarily, because I'm still interested in that from an analog perspective. Just not really that interested in it digitally. What it did more so was it brought audio back into the equation. By using the guitar to MIDI system. I think about guitar players like Bowie. I actually had the pleasure of working with Carlos Alomar, Bowie's guitar player, for a while at Stevens, and he was really into the whole guitar to MIDI thing, and great guitar player, and he would use it to orchestral parts of his guitar and all that, and it's really useful. But at the same time, you can achieve so much more, I think, you could definitely do more if you can use the audio of the instrument, like the actual, because you're sacrificing that, you're giving it up. You're basically saying, well, I want my guitar to sound like a different instrument, which is fine if that's what you want. But there's so much you can achieve with the audio for each register. For example, it makes the guitar an ideal candidate for what I would call multi-channel music, which is where you would have playing in stereo or through a mono amplifier. You can adapt the instrument immediately to multiple loudspeakers. So like 8-channel, you can do 3D audio, you can do a 3-dimensional sound field recording of or a 3D render of a guitar piece, and very easily using this, where you can place different registers in different physical locations. And that in itself is an old idea too. If you look at composers like Henry Brandt, who were composing for different parts of his orchestra and placing them in different physical locations, that's an old idea. John Cage about it a lot, the coexistence of dissimilars. And I always have to thank Andy Bates, who's an Irish composer, because he put me onto this stuff. He was just like, okay, you're actually a guitar player, you would really like this stuff. Concurrently with a friend, John King, who I started Signals Under Test with, and who was the gentleman that invited me to Stein at that point in my kind of guitar band career. Both those guys were kind of pushing me towards that tech and saying, you're going to love this. You should check it out. You should try, programming. Think about how you can use programming in tandem with, conventional guitar playing. And then that then led into a relationship with Matthias Grob, who I'm in contact with now, and actually Delta Sound Labs is working with him on some of his older plugins. He's been using the idea of poly guitar or multi-channel guitar for many years. For those who aren't familiar with him, he invented the loop delay, the first digital looper. He's the guy behind the Echoplex that was sold by Gibson and Oberheim. He also developed Mathons with Andy Butler in the UK, and they built plugins.
What was the last one? Developed.
The company that they formed was Mathons, Mathons, and the other fellow that was involved in that was a guy called Andy Butler. And he's involved in that Looper's Delight community, and he was the developer effectively, and worked with Matt to build plugins. And effectively, what these plugins did, they allowed you to process multiple signals concurrently. So I mean, it was geared towards this idea of like a multi-channel instrument, and they were way ahead of their time. Like, people were like, it's just too hard. How do you manage that complexity? And distortion sounds different. When you distort each register independently, that doesn't sound the same as monophonic distortion. It sounds cleaner. And rock guitar players were kind of turned off by it, whereas I think synth enthusiasts were really turned on by it, and they're like, oh, that's really neat. You can have these like really nice concurrent melodies. There's no, intermodulation distortion. It sounds really cool. It sounds really nice. So that's where I think there's overlap between the synth community and the guitar community. Anyway, but yeah, so the polyphonic channel guitar thing, old idea, kind of guitar to MIDI was built on it and never capitalized on it. It could have done so much more. And then today you've got Sci-Fi Research, which is a company run by Joel de Guzman in the Philippines, and Joel's and I, been talking now for probably best of like I don't know, 3 years or so. And he builds these really nice magnetic that I showed you on the H string that I brought to SAE in Nashville.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Yeah, I've been getting emails from him for years. He's been working on those pickups.
Yeah, so that's his pickup system. I have one of his very first beta pickup systems in my H string. So Joel and we're collaborating on a workshop for Loop in LA this November as well. So we're going to do
And how does that differ from your standard hex pickup?
Well, they're magnetic, they're modular, so that more so, they're easier to install too, better quality. They sound great. I mean, they sound with the piezos. Piezo pickups, you lose so much bass response to them, and there's all pass filter kind of approaches to remedying that and trying to restore a lot of the bass profile that you lose with those kind of pickup systems. Of course, the GK systems were magnetic. They definitely still have some of that bass response. Joel's pickups, I think, are very low noise. The frequency response is through the roof. You have to filter them in the DAW, really, because they're just so full-bodied. You get so much low end and high to top out of them. They're really phenomenal. So you get the full profile as much as an electric guitar can be captured, from that kind of pickup system. It sounds really pretty great. So, and I like it because it kind of disrupts the convention surrounding MIDI as well. Because guitar to MIDI is very much still focused, the idea of like a 13-pin DIN plug, these kind of janky, pickup systems like GraphTech, and no offense to GraphTech, but they're, I have their system installed in my 7-string guitar, and it was a nightmare to work with, to be frank. In fairness to them, though, their system was designed for guitar to MIDI, not audio. Joel's is designed specifically for audio.
Right.
So that would be the biggest difference.
And then your system for multi-channel guitar uses that in with what pure data patches that you've put together?
Yeah, but less so these days. Since I started the company, now I have really solid BSTs that we've developed, and I'm starting to use the software. And again, the ethos, and I think the drive behind the company is the desire of the artist. Like, what kind of tools would I want to make music with? And I kind of feel like it's a bit of a cop-out if I don't actually use them, if I don't actually test them. Like when John sends me a mod, I'll work with it for months and months and months, and I'll use it as much as I can in my practice in the studio and in performances when I improvise. I think I have to put my money where my mouth is, so to speak, with this stuff. So I'm not using PD. So I use PD for workshops and and for teaching mostly these days. But yeah, it all started pure data and max patches and stuff like that.
So are these VSTs? I mean, are these something that anyone with a multi-channel pickup could plug in to their computer and run through without having to program anything?
Yeah, you can. I mean, it's not just multi-channel. I mean, we're discussing the best way to approach multi-channel down the line because we really want to to the guitar community as well as the synthesizer community. I think that's kind of like the intersection that we want to focus on. If it's a mono input, it should be agnostic. I think that's kind of like the deal. I mean, we want it to be agnostic. You can come at it with any instrument. Like we have Chop Filter, which is Matt's plugin, Matthias's plugin that I mentioned before. He came to us with a 32-bit version of it. Said, "We never really sold this. We never really released it. Can you revamp it?" And it's a monophonic plugin. So basically, what it does, it's an envelope follower and it applies modulation across its audio input. And that's one channel at the minute. I'm thinking about extending that obviously to multi-channel, but plugins will, you can configure that to be mono through multi in the end. So currently, this is still in development.
So you're breaking up a little bit, but that VST is a filter plugin of some sort.
Oh, yeah, Chop Filter. Yeah, it's is the connection okay now?
It comes and goes. It's mostly good, but so did you just say Chop Filter?
Chop Filter, yeah.
Yeah, and what does that do?
Chop Filter basically applies modulation effects based on the envelope and audio input.
Okay.
It sounds ace. It sounds really good. And again, it's a perfect tool, not just for music production, but also for live performance.
Are the modulation effects within the plugin, or is this just a way to control other modulation plugins?
They're within the plugin.
Okay. And is that on your site? Is that available yet? Or
it's not available yet, but Peter Kern from Create Digital Music did a feature on it because Matt showed off our revamp. Well, he showed off a revamp with his interface, which we're not owning because we don't like it so much. We have an aesthetic difference of opinion when it comes to the UI design. I can share the link with you. Hold on. Let's see. So you can have a look. Let's see. Great digital music.
Yeah, I know Peter back from when he lived in New York, actually.
Yeah, he's great.
He was involved in I think he was involved in the Warper parties back then.
Oh, yeah?
That's where I met him in New York. Yeah, do you know those, the Ableton Warper parties?
Unfortunately, it was before I arrived in Hoboken, so I never really got the experience. I knew that. I don't know if they still go.
Oh no, they're still going. Yeah, I still get.
Oh, they are.
Yeah.
Was it in Brooklyn or?
It moved around. But sometimes it was in Lower Manhattan. Sometimes it was in Brooklyn.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what got me into this whole thing. was going to those.
The link I'm sharing with you talks about a number of things. It talks about so basically Peter went and met Matt. Peter asked who's at Music Mess, and I was like, Matt's there. He's got some cool stuff of his own that we're going to turn into a module at some point. This sub bass thing that we think will be really nice for guitar. And then there's a picture of this plugin with a really antiquated looking user interface, which is not the user interface we will be releasing. But it was really just to demonstrate to Matt that we can use it, or we can revamp its plugins basically. So it's there. It talks a little bit about that, and then at the bottom of that, review, or if you want to call it an article, I suppose. There's a little demo of the control module being used with a pitch tracker device that we're working on as well. So,
and your pitch tracker will track audio from either a mono guitar pickup or a multi-channel guitar.
Yeah, you can do mono. I mean, this particular one is really geared towards mono. And we have it on beta if you'd like to join the beta for that. I mean, we wrote it as a Max for Live device for the meantime. But we're actually talking with Joel. Actually, Joel de Guzman's at Sci-Fi is working on a different kind of pitch tracking called bitstream pitch tracking, which is less CPU intensive and equally as reliable. So we're hoping that that will become a bit of a standard for tracking multiple registers concurrently, possibly on an embedded device. So we'll just have to see how that pans out. But generally, yeah, that's the focus.
What do you mean by an embedded device?
Oh, like a credit card sized computer, like something like a Pi or a Teensy that can run an operating system on something you could install on your guitar.
Oh,
So you could have like a smart computer that kind of like spits out, control voltage or something. That's something he's very interested in. I'm interested in it too, but it's more of a conversation at the minute rather than a firm product idea.
Well, now, and once again, when you're talking about pitch tracking,
Yeah.
are you talking about audio to MIDI or both?
No MIDI involved. We're not boiling it down to. I mean, you could boil it down to MIDI events. We're keeping the data continuous, meaning we're not dividing it up into an on and off stage, right? So, if you look at the video at the bottom of that, Peter, the CDM article, you'll notice that the pitch tracking tracks bends continuously, glisses continuously without any interruption. And it's just being enveloped, using an envelope follower that we're using. So we're keeping it all analog as well, which is, the audio output all analog in that video demo too. But yeah, we're not boiling it down to like note off MIDI events. I'm not personally interested in that.
So this differs from something like Jam Origin's MIDI guitar, which that's converting audio to MIDI. Are you familiar with that plugin? I mentioned it in Nashville.
Yeah, you did. I'm still not familiar with it so much. I should check it out.
Well, I mean, I think it is different. I think it's because it is definitely converting audio to MIDI. It just doesn't use. You don't need a hex pickup. I mean, it converts polyphonically your guitar strings into MIDI signals. You can control synths with it. You can control anything that's run by MIDI. But I guess that's what you're doing. What it's doing is essentially turning that into on-off signals to control. I know if you're going to control a soft synth with that plugin, that means it must be converting it to MIDI, I assume.
Yeah, I mean, effectively you could. I mean, and again, soft synths less interested in that kind of control. We're more interested in kind of continuous control, like a fixed oscillator and frequency, rather than relying on the MIDI protocol. Now, I mean, with all this said, of course, the MIDI protocol is very well established, and it's unavoidable really in any DAW. But yeah, I mean, it's just not something that's a priority for us right now. I mean,
I'm just trying to clarify. Is that the system you're talking about is basically an advanced form of audio processing? It has nothing to do with MIDI.
It has nothing to do with MIDI. No, it's basically. I mean, I'm sure they share some similarities insofar as there's a routine that's listening to audio and then telling us what the frequency is, right?
Right.
And then we're outputting that continuously. At that point, we stop and we think, well, how can we use this continuous stream of data? We're not interested at the moment in boiling that down into node on, node off, velocity sensitive, software system to drive a soft synth. That's just not really where we're at right now. We're kind of more interested in, kind of more continuous pitch data. One example again in that video that's a little bit different is, we're using control to convert that to high resolution control voltage. So you have 2 to the power 16 values that you could use to, effectively control oscillators pitch microtonally, and do it pretty well as well. And it's continuous, so you can do constant glides. It's not relying on note attack necessarily. You could use a bottleneck slide, and just do a constant glissando from the bottom of a register to the top of the register. And then for the envelope profile, we're just listening to the envelope. You know, we're listening to amplitude, and again in the analog domain, that becomes quite interesting as well. And that's where our control module is really cool, because we can do some digital analysis if we want, and then we can convert that to an analog control signal to do the enveloping and keep the signal path completely analog, which is again what Delta Sound Labs is all. You know, we're interested in leveraging the benefits of both analog and digital.
So, so with your, I mean, your system, ultimately, you will be able, or maybe you do this now, you can control hardware modules with this system.
Yeah. So the idea is kind of like, you know, we do some analysis in the digital domain, but we do no audio processing for the audio output side, meaning we're trying to keep the input to output stage for the sound source completely analog. So we're using our control module, which we're going to be releasing very soon, to basically take that digital analysis and convert it back to analog and use that control signal to then input for effect like an analog sound source. Okay. If that makes sense.
Yeah, kind of. It's still a little confusing where the analog and the digital split. I mean, you're doing doing an analysis, but you're not doing a conversion. Is that what you're saying?
Well, okay. So the analysis is, I mean, there's obviously a conversion happening at the analysis stage. So if you imagine it like this, say I have a divided pickup, and I'm running those. You know, I have the ability to multiplex that output, let's say, and I have the stringed outputs going through a bunch of analog effects units that have the ability to be controlled using CV, right?
Okay.
And let's say that I also want to be able to say on one of those strings, patch that into some kind of digital system. And that digital system allows me to track the pitch, the timbre, the envelope of that instrument, and then take that information and use it to control the analog processes that I mentioned first.
So it sounds like a simultaneous thing. So
It is simultaneous.
As the analog signal is going, I mean, just to make this dead stupid simple, it's as if you're plugging into a Boss chorus, and going through the Boss analog chorus, but somehow something is analyzing everything about your attack and pitch and everything, and all of that is adjusting the parameters of that chorus.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so I think the point I'm kind of failing to make clear here is that the end result in terms of the net result in terms of the audio output will always be analog.
Right, but that's true even if you're going through an analog to a digital converter.
But the actual sound source itself is not going through an A to D process at all.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Okay.
Yeah, but the control signals that we're generating with control are high resolution to the power 16 control voltages that are representative of, you know, smart digital analysis. Effectively, that's giving us things like continuous pitch data. And you know, timbral analysis and envelope following and that kind of thing. So yeah, I mean, it basically just gives you more bandwidth, I would say, without, you know, having to deal with issues of latency, right?
Right.
You know, because you know, as far as the playing of the instrument is concerned and what you're hearing as the audio output, it's purely analog. So.
Right.
Anyway,
I think we're talking about the same thing. I'm not exactly sure because
it's interesting because we're still trying to figure out the language as well and how to talk to people about this stuff. And it's really nice to be able to tease out, well, what is the best way to say it? You know, because we're still building this stuff, and you know, we haven't. You know, we're showing people where we're at right now, but we haven't said, okay, well, now it's done, here it is, go play with it. I mean, we're saying, okay, well, this is where we're at. And, you know, you saw a prototype in Nashville, and it, you know, works really pretty well, actually. It works pretty pretty great. And you know, it's still, the language is still pretty nascent. It's still underdeveloped. We're still trying to get a sense of like, how do we communicate these ideas clearly, and so these conversations really help.
Right. Well, let's maybe it'll help to discuss your record, and how. What did you the new record?
The Disrupt Construct. Yeah.
Disrupt Construct. Right. That. Well, let's step back a second to Signals Under Tests. What exactly is that? That's the name you recorded the record under.
Yeah, so that was actually I guess a pseudonym for my experimental guitar venture, I guess.
Okay.
That I started with John King when we were artists in residence at Stein, which followed on from the orientation that we did. So the general idea there was, you know, it was kind of the first experiments with the divided pickup, actually. So we got together, and again, I just started to get into programming. He had more programming experience than me. So he was using Super Collider to process my guitar. So we were basically a guitar laptop duo at that point. And so I would perform, you know, I would do some stuff in live, and he would spatialize the guitar, apply like modulation effects and all kinds of stuff. So yeah, he was the other half of it for a couple of years, and then I moved to the US, and then, you know, I've been doing it on my own ever since, pretty much. I collaborate obviously with other people, so this recent collaboration is with Helmut Neidhart, the German drone guitar player I mentioned. He's from Dortmund, and the record should be going out this year on Demo Valley, which is a German drone label.
What's the name of the label?
Demo Valley, DENOVALI.
Okay. And is John in the Antwerp and Belfast videos? Is that?
Yeah, he is. Like, he's in so that was like the very first incarnation of Signals Under Tests. There's one in Belfast as well. I think that was the first ever show we did, where it was kind of, you know, a lot of canned stuff, you know, tape, but real-time processing, very heavy industrial kind of music that came out of that first effort. And then it got pretty ambient, and then now it's, you know, it's kind of me, synthesizers, and any percussionist I can get a hold of.
And so, how did you create this record? Were you using the multi-channel?
Yeah, I was using Joel's system for this. So it's basically the way I kind of function is I have the multi-channel pickup. I basically sit down and improvise, and I record those improvisations, and I use that as source material, which I then later arrange. So very similar to the process I described for the Aidan Baker record, where, you know, he was handed a bunch of source material and then he arranged it into a piece of music. I function in the same kind of way. So I like to perform live and capture that, and then take those moments and sculpt them into a larger scale composition. And I wanted to do a long form vinyl release where I had, you know, one track on each side, effectively. So I reached out to Helmut. We had talked about doing something a while. He sent me some drone material in response to some improvisations I'd sent to him. And then, you know, 6 months later, I came up with this record, you know, just by working on it over the, you know, the summer months through to, I think, you know, it's been it's been a while.
Well, were you performing with the multi-channel pickup through digital processing and simultaneously triggering hardware modules, or was
for this particular record? No, because I didn't yet have control. I didn't have this system set up. So actually, the majority of the source material emerged through a residency I did at EMS in Stockholm. I actually did two, one last summer and the one the year before that. So the first time I was there, it was really digging my teeth into synthesis, like modular synthesis in general, and hardware, because I was a programmer, synth dude at that point, you know, using PD Max, that kind of thing, Ableton. hadn't really spent an awful lot of time in the Eurorack world until that moment, to be completely honest. So having access to their Buchla and Surge systems was really kind of neat. So you know,
what was the second system? The Buchla and the what?
Surge, SERGE.
Okay.
Surge is it's a wonderful gritty system that they have. They have a Surge studio and then they have the Buchla studio. And then they have a multi-channel studio. So I went into the multi-channel studio with a guitar, put the system, it was using the PD patches that I showed you. I put the result through this multi-channel system that they had in that studio, and I recorded each individual channel, as well as I did a sound field recording of the room, which I used sparingly throughout that record. Not that you can tell on a vinyl record, to be frank, but it does lend some nice ambiances at times. The Surge stuff, it was really just me going in and experimenting, like using this little guy, the Keith McMillan, Q Nexus with the CV outs, that to control their systems with the analog systems with Ableton. And then they had an old pitch tracker built into the Surge system, which was really not very good, not very accurate, but I had a ton of fun with it. And I was like, I plugged the guitar in, did mono tracking, some, bass lines and things like that. So I had a ton of material. I think I had about close to about 24 hours worth of audio across the two visits. And a lot of it I ended up didn't use. I spent, while my wife was in Dublin at Trinity doing a professorship, I was there using the studios at MMT, the Media and Music Technology program studios, and it took me that whole time, period of about 6 months, to edit out the bits I wanted to use. And then as soon as I got back to the US, I was like, okay, that's it, cut off point. Right. Let's arrange this into a vinyl 12-inch record with Helmet. We pitched it to Deno Valley. They liked it, so it's slated. It'll be released at some point, hopefully this year.
Is it just going to be on vinyl?
I think they'll probably. I mean, the audio, the digital format's mastered for vinyl, so it's everything under 120 hertz is kind of absent, pretty much. So I toyed with the idea of doing a digital master, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to keep a vinyl release, and then if you want the digital audio, it's there. It is what it is. That's it. I need to move on. So I'm on to a different project at this point.
Right.
So, but
the vinyl is gorgeous. That the
marble finish is really good. Yeah, the company that did that are based up in Virginia. What are they called? What are they called? Damn, I forget it. No, but. Yeah, there's a nice vinyl place up in Virginia. Where is it? It's pretty near DC. I think it's in Fairfax or something like that. Is it?
Oh, that's okay. And people will find it. I was curious, why did you decide not to create individual tracks?
I just have grown really tired of that format, that presentation. It's boring to me to, I don't know, I wanted to challenge myself, I guess, in part. I never released anything that was long form. And when I compose and I kind of feel like it's more kind of like movement based, and I think when I try to fit something into track form, I end up compromising on what I would rather put down on a record. And I realize for public consumption, that makes it a little tricky, but the older I get, the less I care, to be frank.
Let's pray for increased attention spans. But
that's
that said,
not going to happen in this time anyway.
That said, how did you decide where to split the sides?
I kind of approximated what the vinyl would support. I guess we did the test pressing, and it worked out, so I was happy enough. And how did that work out? Yeah, it's a good question. I think two main themes emerged from the sessions. One was I had these really nice continuous improvisations that I did with. I remember it was in the multi-channel studio, Studio 2 at EMS, which is where they have all these really nice Genelec and Mayer system. And it was just this really nice continuous set of recordings that weren't broken up in any way. And I had some stems from a Buchla 200, it's kind of nice glitchy pulsing beat. And that was a really easy piece. That was constructed. It was a nice, easy piece of music to put together. So, I mean, I don't know. It just, to me, two very clear themes emerged. So that was the construct part of it that really just came out of one larger improvisation with some nice guitar material coming later. And then Disrupt was much harder to put together, but I think it became the more interesting side on the record because it's, pockets of musical ideas that I thought, while they're somewhat disjointed, they kind of work. There's a cohesiveness there. And that took a significant amount of time to put together, I will admit. But yeah, that came together through just a piecing together of improvisations that I really liked. And yeah, I mean, it tells that kind of story of like trying to build up different ideas and disrupting them and breaking them apart and trying to build something new. I guess that's kind of the overarching theme for the record, is that, build it, break it, reconstruct it. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely a record of two halves on many levels.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, the short answer to your question is that what was helpful was that there were distinct improvisations that kind of sat out to me, and that I thought, hey, that's really cool. I want to use that as the basis of this piece. And then typically that was like, it could have been a texture, it could have been a pulse generated by the synthesizers that I'd used at EMS, or it could have been guitar lines or loops. One thing that I was really proud of, particularly with how the Delta Sound Lab stuff has come about, is this granular sampler we built, which is based on a bunch of PDE patches that I programmed years ago and I'd shown to you. And that instrument itself, it's an instrument in its own right. I mean, you can feed anything into it. It allows you to time stretch audio in the time domain and create these really nice small repeating loops. It's almost like phasing in and out, very much like you might expect from like Lamont Young or Steve Reich or somebody like that. Somebody that's playing with phase rather than kind of like clearly defined polymeters or polyrhythms. So you have these really big shifting kind of textures and timbres, and I think for me that there were very two distinct sets of those kinds of textures that kind of emerge from the improv, and that's how I write music. I'll just sit down, I'll record improvisations and cherry pick the bits that I think were stand out and work from there. And I really just sit down in the studio and build and reorganize, and there's a lot of the older I get, the better I am at kind of removing parts that are unnecessary by my own reckoning. Whereas when I was much younger, it was hard to. I was kind of like throw everything in the kitchen sink in there. So it was an interesting process generally. Now that I'm reflecting on it and thinking through it.
Right. Well, and so were you using the Stream plugin on these improvisations?
I was using the PD patch incarnation of that, yeah. Right. So I mean, what you can achieve with Stream effectively, you're hearing on that record, because it was the routine that emerged out of that came from years of refinement, and it's not a complex algorithm. It's just it started out pretty complex, and then like most things that we've done with the company, we're stripping it back. We're trying to simplify it because simple tools make more sense. And when simple tools make more sense, you make more music. And that's the ethos. or we make simpler interfaces that control, more complex structures, and then you can make more music with that too. But yeah, short answer, yes, some version of it.
Yeah, well, because I've been using it or playing with it and
Yeah.
using multiple instances of it
Yeah.
creates some amazing textures by just doing different granular streams on 2 or 3 tracks that are all receiving information simultaneously. And I wanted to ask you in some of the videos, like what is going on in the developing mapping strategies for spatial music performance?
Oh boy,
Videos.
yeah. I mean, this is my former life as an academic that I don't like to talk about it. I'm just kidding. Yeah, I mean, a lot of this stuff would, those videos on that channel are in support of papers
Right.
presented at New Interfaces for Musical Expression conference, which is a big conference dedicated to interface design for music.
Which conference? I'm sorry. I think.
At NIME, NIME.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So I've been a part of that community now for about 4 iterations of it, and I was there this year. We were presenting Control at NIME this year at Virginia Tech. So a lot of those videos are purely in support of like an academic paper, but I think what's interesting about those videos, if anything, is that they explore different modes of controlling sound structure, right? Or different ways to control sound processing. So it explores like motion tracking of the human body, looking at, okay, well, if you're playing a guitar, like what kind of movements are you making? How can you track that? How can you map it to parameters inside of software? And again, that's something that I, had spent a lot of time doing, like tracking particular parts of the guitar and using it to control various audio processing parameters. That's one thing that's outlined in those videos.
Is that tracking it with a camera and converting that to processing?
Precise. Yeah, exactly that. So, I mean, everything from skeletal tracking using the Microsoft or the Xbox Kinect, and then that's converting, positional data.
Right.
That you can then, it becomes an X, Y, Z grid that you can assign to anything. So, my interest in spatial music or 3D audio, to use a more mainstream term, lent itself very well to that. This kind of idea lent itself very well to that. So you could basically play sound with your body in a space.
Well, are you familiar with the Source Audio Hot Hand? Do you know that?
Yeah.
Did this predate that or?
Good question. I think, I think I was playing around. I mean, there's plenty of stuff prior to what I've done that predates the hot hands. Like the idea of like motion tracking.
Yeah, I know that does. I'd be curious just to ask you though why you think that never caught on with. I mean, that's been around for it's got to be 7 to 8 years at least, maybe more.
Yeah. Probably for a lot of the same reasons, the whole multi-channel or polyphonic guitar. I mean, I don't like the term polyphonic guitar because a guitar is polyphonic regardless of the tech. But I mean, multi-channel guitar thing didn't catch on because people just didn't know how to use it. There's no methodology. There's no like practice. There's no artist that's out there using it. I mean, if you give hot hands to a ton of bass players that were really, really well known and we're using it in innovative ways, or I hate that word. I shouldn't use that word. Like creative ways, right? That really resonated with people. Then people would have bought it. People would have loved it.
Well, that's when they sold it, because when dubstep came around, bass players got into it for the dubstep thing, and that's the most success they have with it. I was surprised. I mean, they did a USB version that never caught on with DJs or electronic musicians, because I mean. There you have the obvious issue of they can look like they're reading their email while they're performing, and that added a kinetic thing to it. And I used to use it. I mean, for guitar players, part of the problem is you need both hands to play. So
sure.
So I got around it by putting it under the strings up at the top of the neck behind the nut, and then I could just move my neck and control filters and delay, feedback and things like that, which it worked really well. But it's just interesting. I mean, the whole pushing the envelope with technology. I mean, as I've said many times, guitar players are, slightly more reactionary than Attila the Hun for the most part, and can be. So, but it's very encouraging. I mean, that's one reason I started the magazine, and it's been very encouraging to see that's changing. I don't know if you find that. But,
yeah, I do, and I still think that there's such an intersection to be, built on, and that is between the synthesizer enthusiasts and guitar players. I think that to paraphrase Nick Collins, like, the guitar is the perfect candidate for electroacoustic music. I mean, it's great because it's popular. There's a history. There's a huge repertoire behind it, and it's interesting to consider how to map that to this kind of tech, because it is it's an acoustic instrument. It can be analog. It can be digital very quickly. There's a ton you can do with it. And then you mentioned, like, the idea of, like, using these devices like hot hand cameras and so on. I mean, for me, if I put aside the tech for a minute and think about the theory behind it, I mean, that's another reason why I think they don't succeed, is because there's no kind of clear use case, or when you learn to scale, you learn how to apply it in particular context, right? How do you apply, like, what are the performance contexts for hot hand, or and you can say, I can control a filter, but when does that stop getting, when does that stop becoming interesting, or when does it get boring? Is there a learning curve? Is there an exponential learning curve? Can it be developed? Can you develop a vocabulary with it? I think is really what I'm trying to say. Oftentimes the answer is no, because there's not the same kind of finite control. There's a guy, Stan Godlovich, and not everyone agrees with this, and nor should they. But I think it's an interesting point, which is that the reason the guitar is successful as a musical instrument is because it's kind of a poor design. I mean, it's a flawed instrument, and to overcome it is part of the appeal. You gotta, this is an instrument that's effectively, let's dumb it down for a minute and say it's wood with strings, right? It's obviously much more sophisticated than that, but you've got to the snags that are there. You have to overcome to be a great guitar player. Whereas if I give somebody, a new MIDI controller, like a Q-Nexus, even if it's based on the piano, or a push or something like that. I mean, but the push is a slight exception because it does have. I think it's more sophisticated, but the point is that there's a learning curve. You got to learn a vocabulary, and there's a struggle with it. You got to invest the hours. It's why it kind of demands a certain respect, right? Because when you hear a guitar, guitar or any instrument, any acoustic instrument, because, like, anytime you hear a good performer, you're like, damn, they must have put in the hours. They put in the effort. And when you hear somebody play an instrument really well with, like, great emotion, great phrasing, it translates. And that's something that digital technology sucks at. And that's why you have conferences like NIME. They're trying to figure out, well, how does digital technology achieve it? It may never achieve it.
Well, but isn't there, I mean, there's a learning, I understand what you're saying. There's a learning curve.
Like I said, you don't have to agree with it.
Well, no. I mean, I'm just curious. I mean, isn't there a learning curve with technology? I mean, with any kind of technology. I mean, sure. I don't know if you ever saw the film Scratch about the DJs. It's a great film about DJ culture. Yeah. But that's back when they were doing the scratching and the needle drops. I mean, watching that made me realize there's an insane amount of hours need to be put in for that. And every time I see a really great electronic musician, they've put in the hours. Somebody like Fenez or
I think that you know that because you have the prior knowledge. But when you look at whether you care or not about the kind of mainstream populace or not is another question. But there's an immediate disconnect there because they don't have that prior knowledge. They don't have the ability to say, well, okay, I know what's going on there. He's using a DAW, and he spent ages programming something, and he's meticulously using a mixer as an instrument with guitar. I mean, if I was to critique it from a guitar standpoint, Fennis is not interesting. I mean,
no, I mean, yeah, it's true. I mean, I probably should have used an example of someone who doesn't play guitar but is a great electronic musician.
Oh yeah, I mean, he is. And for the record, I love his guitar playing. I love his guitar music. I think he's a fantastic artist.
But something who can I use as an example? One of the DJs like DJ Crush, or
right.
or DJ Spooky, or somebody who's a pure electronic musician, or somebody who just uses a laptop, but is obviously. I mean, do you think part of it is part of it the email reading factor? In other words, when you see a guitar player playing, you're seeing him exert all this effort and do all this stuff. Even if you don't play guitar, you understand that. Whereas when you're watching a great electronic musician, they look like
yeah, I mean, I think the key word is effort. I mean, and a lot of people have written about this in academia as well. It's like, how do you communicate effort? How do you communicate effort in a performance scenario? And I mean, when you think about a really good guitar player, and I talked about this with Adrian Freed as well, it's like, okay, well, if they're exerting a lot of energy, yes, that's interesting to watch, but actually the more refined players achieve greater feats with less energy because they're well practiced.
Exactly.
Right, they're efficient, I think, more so than anything else, or economic.
Well, I don't know. I mean, you see all the rock and blues guitar players. Somebody was just doing an imitation, and he said, every time you see a blues player play it, every time he plays a note, it looks like he smelled something bad.
Yeah, right.
I mean, and they make the, and I even did a contact sheet of all photos of me playing guitar, called Guitar Faces, where I have myself shot making all of and they're you see these guys looking like they're struggling like crazy to play the simplest things,
right?
And so I mean, in terms of perception, I think it has a lot to do with that. But
sure, I mean, I've written about it in the video you mentioned. I mean, if I could summarize the problem in one word, it's disembodiment. The reason that DJs still have success is because there's a physical activity that's evident. I mean, you're watching somebody physically manipulate a medium, even if they're using, Tractor or something like that. There's still a physical act that's based on, like, vinyl, effectively, right?
Right.
That's still relatable. I mean, you can say, well, that's based on this technology that's physical. There's a physicality to it. Laptop sets are harder because there's no way to communicate what you're doing because it's a black box. I mean, I always remember what Joel Ryan had written about in an old Stein article was that, okay, you got to remember the computer was built for word processing effectively. So it's not made for expressive. It's not an expressive controller at all. Whereas, the guitar, there's a struggle, you're trying to overcome the design of the instrument effectively to communicate some kind of musical idea. So a good question that we were playing with when it came to like motion tracking and pitch tracking and all of that kind of stuff was, can you reconnect the disconnect? I mean, like, can you start to piece together connections between what the sound source is, the processes that are happening in the box, and what the audience are hearing and seeing? And that's a tough question, but it's also an exciting question because you can rewire it completely differently and create different kinds of relationships. So if you read, I don't know if you're interested, but there's a paper that I wrote with Brian Bridges, my ex-PhD advisor, on embodied mapping strategies. And basically what that means is that when you sit down to program a computer to react to an instrument, think about the kinds of bodily metaphors that you can use as a basis for those mapping strategies. So the idea would be like, okay, everybody, what are the types of things that everybody feels with their body? So they know like what it feels like. Well, most people know how it feels to like stand up, sit down, feel forces act on their body in different ways. Are there ways in which we can use that for a way to describe music. An example of that is like pitchy music, right? You think about sounds coming from very high up or down low, depending on their register. You might think about like intense SPLs is like really, big intensity, and you might think about stuff that's really far away as being highly reverberated. You might think about time being really far away if it's in the past. If it's present, it's right up on you, and if it's in the future, it might be in front of you, right? So these are all like different metaphors that we played with for like spatialization. So if I can physically place a sound in a space, can I create a different narrative? Can I create a narrative with the computer that's just operating in a different way to a conventional instrument? So it's kind of like, okay, digital technology sucks at this. That's fine. What can it do well?
All right.
So I don't know if anything makes sense.
Yeah, totally, and it's a very interesting question. I mean, I read this book that was unfortunately a little too academic about reverb and about how that started with the churches. I mean, they were specifically set up for that reverb to create a sense of power and majesty. I mean, there are all sorts of things you can do. We're talking about what you can do with pure sound, and within a computer or not. But the other question that I've had discussions with friends when I lived in San Francisco was for the musician, the difference in playing an instrument that you connect with bodily, like the guitar or like almost any acoustic instrument, and making music with a laptop, purely with a laptop, where you're just using a controller. I mean, I guess something like Push is a little more kinetic and a little more body connected, but there is a thing about blowing through with your breath or playing with your hands and your fingers and coordinating those things, and feeling the guitar against your body or a cello or a violin against your body and all that kind of stuff. That's a different feeling, and I don't know that it makes, I mean, it was just an interesting question. Is there any way, that's why I've been so interested in things like the Hot Hand or the Kinect. I've seen people do things with the Kinect or Wii, or just so that it feels like you're, or what's her name, Imogen Heap, she did a whole thing with the body.
Yeah, her MIDI.
Her whole body was connected to the MIDI. I mean, that's a whole interesting area of just consideration, and I guess I don't know if it's connected or separate from what we were talking about with with the effect of I mean, I think that the whole sonic effect is one thing, but then there's I mean, and how the sonic effect affects your body. I mean, what do they call Sun O? I mean, band like that.
Sun.
Yeah, where I mean they are rearranging your internal organs, which has an effect on your body. But and loud music does that in general for people, and I think in the EDM things, the fact they crank it that loud has something to do with it. But then the other side of the coin is for the performer. How do you get involved? I mean, and as someone who plays guitar in this context, do you feel that helps you connect in a way that you maybe couldn't doing pure electronic stuff?
I mean, I think the guitar is instantly recognizable, and it's a double-edged sword because I think there's a certain set of expectations that people have when they see it, right? I mean, if you go to play a gig and you get up on stage with a guitar, people expect a certain thing to happen, and that can be comforting or that can be really jarring. I think.
Well, I'm talking about from the opposite end, though, from your end as a performer. In other words, I mean, not putting the audience aside. Do you feel that when you make electronic music, using the guitar, is that a different experience for you than, say, making electronic music, twisting knobs on modular hardware, or using a controller with patches or stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point of reference, and I think there's a definite comfort that comes from it because of the years of experience invested in learning it. Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, it's a good place for me to start. I think you know, all of the music that I've produced to date has some form of guitar recording in it, guitar audio. I love it as an instrument. It's versatile. You can get a lot of really cool sounds out of it. I think it's an excellent, like I said, it's a great candidate for that kind of music. So yeah, I mean, I definitely derive a lot of comfort from that instrument. There's a familiarity with it. I find it, I still, to this day, find it incredibly inspiring as an instrument as well.
Now, do you think if you never played guitar and you just started, like many young musicians do, with the laptop, do you feel you'd be missing something in terms of connection with music? That's kind of what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that I would well, I'm hazarding, I guess, really.
Yeah,
but
I mean, it's hard to tell.
It's hard to know, but I would imagine, yeah, I imagine I would because, well, for me personally at least, I come from a musical family. You know, my family all played, like my father's an Irish traditional musician, my brother's a folk musician, my mom's involved in the Irish traditional arts as well from back home. And I don't know, it's a history, I think, and you probably wonder, well, electronic interfaces are all well and good, but what must it be like to have that kind of raw, visceral, physical interaction with an acoustic instrument? I mean, I don't know. It's a very different experience, and yeah, I think I would be. I think I would miss it enough to be intrigued to the point where I would start, no matter what age.
Well, it's interesting because one thing I'm finding from my reading and experience is a lot of young people who start on electronics with samples and stuff, find themselves wanting to learn an actual instrument, wanting to learn piano or learn guitar or take that up just to get a certain kind of feeling. But ultimately, for me, it seems, and something going back, I think you were hinting at earlier, the guitar being great for electroacoustic music, it's the combination of the two that I find the most interesting and I think you're moving in that direction with this, and so I'll be fascinated to see where it goes. What is next for you musically? Are you going to be doing another record or performing?
Yeah, well, I mean, the exciting thing is like I said, I just moved to Cleveland, and I've been really quick to try and plug into the scene here, and there's a really big noise scene. I've already found a percussionist to play with, which is great. A couple of really cool festivals here as well. So there's a really nice community of experimental, and there's a lot of crossover with contemporary classical as well, which is kind of great. So at the minute, I'm working on some improvisations that I recorded with a beautiful Yamaha Electone organ that was owned by the president of Eggleston Works, which is a loudspeaker company in Memphis, and he very graciously allowed me to come in with my audio card and record with it for a day or two, and it produces like these wonderful textures. This big old church organ. So I got some really good material out of that, and that's forming the basis of something. I'm chipping away at that at the minute. That's likely to be another collaborative release this time with a good friend of mine, Ronald Marin. He's a Belgian guitarist and kind of drone artist. So yeah, we might see something with him, and yeah, I'll be performing a lot hopefully over the next while. I'm going to be doing a couple of events with the Ableton University tour this year, so I'm going to be presenting in the Midwest region primarily. So I think Capital University, University of Michigan, University of Central Missouri, and then hopefully some other gigs before the year is out. We'll see.
That's great.
Try to get back to Nashville too. I mean, I had a really nice time at Circuit Benders Ball last summer. So,
well, that'd be terrific. It'd be great to see you in person again, and who knows, maybe collaborate.
Yeah, sure, definitely.
Cool.